New Zealand was on its second COVID lockdown. I was busy being a bad citizen and had travelled farther than the recommended distance from my place of residence. There was a nice secluded beach that was quite a drive, but it had great privacy. I needed to get out of the house. Working from home was driving me mad because I was having difficulty separating my work life from my personal life. Wake up and roll out of bed, go on computer and do work for 8 hours, log off work account and watch videos or play games on the same computer for the rest of the day, snacking unhealthily. This was my life for the past month, and I was getting depressed that news of an extension to lockdown was spreading. So, that's why I was at the beach, more than an hour's drive away from my home. I had to get away, and I did. I knew I would need to be back at it again once the weekend was over, but I was trying not to think so negatively for the sake of my mental health. I walked for a long time. The beach was not a slope to the land, but it lay below big mud and rock cliffs. To get down to the beach, you need a set of stairs built by Boy Scouts in the 80s. It's a great view from the top, and the isolation is worth it. It's not a very straight beach either. You need to follow it by walking around the cliffs. There's a lot of blind corners. So it was when I came around another bend that I saw it. The biggest beached whale I'd ever seen. To be fair, I had never seen a beached whale before, so any beached whale would have broken that record. The actual sheer size of this thing was hardly comprehensible, as it lay there in the sand, right in front of my eyes. The closer I got to it, the more unreal it seemed. It was also strangely shaped. I figured maybe it was two whales pumped together, and I possibly had a confusing perspective. I jogged closer to it. I was so excited. I had only ever heard about finding these things. Half of the creature still lay in the ocean. I couldn't tell if the tide was coming in or out. Its massive tail floated in the wash, black as ink. It looked more like a giant eel than a whale. I couldn't tell where the split in the tail was. When I neared it, stood next to it, kicked sand on it and touched its skin, I still was mind-boggled from its existence and size. I'm struggling to find words to explain it. It's like when you buy a building that you've lived next to for years, and you have just accepted that the sun won't ever touch your house because of it. Or it's like when you're trying to spot something on a cliff, and you just give up looking at it because of eye strain. It's big, and I wanted to find its head. In my mind, I imagined a half-eaten whale skull, and seagulls fighting each other over a piece of its flesh. Funny enough, there were no gulls around, or any seabird for that matter. I guessed it had just washed up, and the birds hadn't found it yet. Nor the crabs, or any of the other usual hungry scavengers. But I knew it must only be a matter of time. I walked beside its oblong body, towards where I thought the head would be, stroking my hand along its smooth and scarred skin. Besides the tail trailing into the ocean, the big creature seemed curled inward. I had, up to that point, really only seen its backside. But it was only hiding its horrors from me, until I saw the head. The face, a mouth agape and sharp teeth, spewed out tentacles the length of 3 of me's, long, fleshy and pocked. My head tried to make sense of it. I had not seen this on Planet Earth or Blue World, or whatever other nature documentary I had seen. I thought this was a dinosaur with a giant squid in its mouth. I made up a story in my brain of it coming out of the deep blue sea, attempting to battle with the colossal cephalopod, choking halfway, and their bodies ending up on one of the hundreds of New Zealand beaches. There were 2 large holes where its eyes should have been. Its skull was more lizard-like, and the 4 huge tentacles that flopped out of its maw revealed curved, barbed hooks in the peeled-back suction cups. Upon closer inspection of the squid or octopus arms, I realized they were not that of a different animal, but of the giant creature itself. It had 4 separate prehensile tongues, like a nightmare movie monster. An epiphany hit me. It's clearly a prop for a movie, I thought briefly. I started putting my hands all over. The teeth were hard, the skin soft and firm, the tentacles squishy, all covered with a light thin layer of some sort of slime. A smelly, gooey, sticky, and shiny slime. I tried wiping it on my pants, but I was still gross and not drying out. The most efficient way was to dip my slime-covered hand in the sand and scrape off the sand. I brought out my phone and started taking pictures. I couldn't get most of the giant thing in the shot, and it kept looking like a giant collage of random close-up fish market finds. As I backed up to take better photos, I wondered who I would send them to. And my heart dropped when I couldn't think of anyone. Being a little bit of a loner kind of does that to you. It was one of the reasons work and lockdown was making me so depressed. So, I called the emergency line. Who else is there to call, really? I didn't want the operator to think I was insane, so I mentioned I think I found a dead, endangered species. The sort of thing New Zealand takes kind of seriously. I was vague about the description, but they eventually transferred me to the Department of Conservation. I was worried about getting in trouble for violating lockdown rules, but they assured me they were happier that I called rather than try to hide it to avoid trouble. After answering a few questions vaguely, they promised me a ranger would be on their way. It would take less than an hour, since one was in the area. I promised I would wait by the body. Let me tell you that after 20 minutes of being in this thing's presence, I began to feel sick. For one thing, there was a smell. It wasn't faint nor powerful, but my nose just did not adjust to the scent. Like rotting seaweed and copper, I found myself taking casual steps away from it. Eventually, I sat down near the corner where I first turned to see it. I could keep an eye on it, and also the direction the ranger would come from. Another 20 minutes, and I was lying down, looking at the passing clouds, trying not to feel so dizzy. I heard an unintelligible voice in my head. I looked to where it was coming from. I saw the massive black shape on the shore. It seemed more rotund than when I first arrived, like it was digesting something, or was pregnant. Maybe I just didn't notice the bulge before, since I was too overwhelmed by the size in the beginning. Then, a real voice, loud and clear, came from the other direction. "You all right, mate?" it said. A tall man with a bushy beard, hiking boots and stubbies was walking towards me. I stood up, my stomach flipped a little, and I swallowed it down. I introduced myself and explained to him that just ahead was the most unreal thing I had ever seen, and if he had any explanation for me, I would take it. At first he looked past me at the lump of sea monster behind me and gave me a wide-eyed stare. "This isn't what the call was about," he said. "I didn't want to seem like a nutter," I replied. "Right," he affirmed, and cautiously walked past me to the corpse. I followed him, at a distance. I talked the entire time he examined it. He was wordless until he arrived by its face. A slurry of curse words came out of his mouth, and he backed away from it. He told me he was calling the Coast Guard and his own bosses. This took a lot of phone calls. He was calling and using codes I didn't understand, and lingo unfamiliar to me. The illness made me stand awkwardly. I was holding my stomach, but trying not to look like I was in pain. I wanted to get away for a bit, but also I did not want to miss a single second of its discovery. Of course, I kind of also wanted the credit. Gathering people took time, a long time. The whole point of not going out during lockdown was so that rescue services didn't need to expose themselves, going out to save you from whatever dumb thing you've decided to do. In time, 2 large boats sailed back and forth along the coastline, but they never docked or landed on the beach. Neither of them got close to the tail either. Before long, I saw vehicles on the beach. I had no idea how they got there, but they managed it somehow. Mostly it was the ranger, whose name was Tom, who talked endlessly on the phone. Every once in a while, he would pause to ask me a question. How long have you been here? When did you find this? What else do you know? Did you touch it? I thought about the trace of slime on my pants and lied. No. But I was sweating at this point, and I just wanted to empty my guts away from the other people's eyes. So I asked to be excused for a minute. He told me okay, but don't go too far. A marine biology team was coming that had some questions. I headed to the waters to spew. The motion of the waves made the tail seem like it was swimming peacefully. It was calming, at the same time it was nauseating. I turned to my right to gaze at it again. It seemed bigger this time. I was almost sure, but the stomach acid came up, and I unloaded down my jersey. I felt better, but a shot of anxiety-based adrenaline shot through my heart. I was crazy embarrassed that I got sick in front of somebody. Actually, more people arrived, and I saw that it was in front of quite a few somebodies. As I carefully took off my shirt to wash it in the ocean, there were other people getting busy with the creature. Photos, samples, measurements, and all sorts of data collection were happening rather rapidly. It took me another minute of laundry washing to realize why. The tide was coming in fast. At this particular place, when the tide comes in, it goes right up to the cliffs, and there is no beach anymore. I wondered if it would wash away even this giant. The panic-induced sciencing seemed to point to yes. It was definitely bigger. I'm absolutely sure of it. Even with the water now covering even more of its body, I could tell it was puffy. The salty cold water clung to my skin and made me feel better. With my newfound health, I had a second wind to go face to face with it again. I just wanted to see how much bigger it had gotten. Someone shouted at me, but I pretended I couldn't hear them. Probably saying something about my own safety, but I needed to look. Around the slimy corner, I saw its teeth again. A mouth that could eat me, and I would barely be a snack. I tried to move closer to it. I wanted to see the tentacles again. But then I noticed a sound coming out of one of its eye holes. A breeze that had picked up and hit it just right to make a sort of blowing into a jug noise. I questioned myself. Where were the eyes? If I peep into it, can I see its brain? I glanced around. The water was pooling at my feet already. I stepped on a tentacle and kept my hand on a bit of gum for balance, choosing to be careful around the teeth. Down the chasm of the hole was not a missing eye. There it was, the eye. Round and insane, and bloodshot and black, like a human or a demon's. I saw myself in the eye, and I saw my reflection scream. I screamed back at it in utter terror. I wanted to fall back and look away, but I was locked, and I could feel my bones tighten. My reflection started reaching towards me, trying to grab me, to pull me in. My jaw felt like it was looking into a screeching pose, and it would become frozen, lost in fear. Someone grabbed my wet shirt, and I fell back on the puddly sand, choking out the last breath I was sure I didn't have. I gasped and cried some more. Tom the ranger, and someone wearing a soaking wet rain jacket, was dragging me away. I kicked my legs and arms, not out of frustration, but I just felt the urge to confirm that I could indeed move them again. As they pulled me away, like I was an aggressive dog, I saw again that it was bigger, specifically around where one could reasonably believe the stomach would be. Then it exploded. Apparently, when things die, gas can build up inside them, and corpses can explode. It happens a lot to beached whales. But this thing, being as huge as it was, exploded like a bomb. The sound was unforgettable, because I think I picked up tinnitus from it. Like a huge drum the size of a trampoline was punched by a giant. Acid and sinew chunks blew sky high and rained down on everyone. Someone actually got poisoned from it when it landed on their bare skin, and they couldn't get it to wash off. I remember seeing that. It slathered all over his arm and dissolved some of his skin. I couldn't hear his screams because my ears were still ringing. He, surprisingly, was the only one injured during the incident. The other thing that came out of the creature was garbage. Plastic, glass, metal, and who knows what else. From small wrappers to large objects. I think I even saw a whole boat in there. It didn't stop coming out, spilling into the water and spreading. Blood mixed with partially digested waste turned the sea a dark, chunky burgundy. Brightly coloured recyclables bobbed up and down in the murky ocean. Fishing nets, bunched together with guts interwoven within them, floated along the top like a soup scum. Grocery bags wafted around like a ghost of half-eaten jellyfish. That smell everyone was initially assaulted with when they first arrived increased tenfold into a toxic miasma. I was evacuated and told the area was considered contaminated. It was a long talk with Tom and a woman from the marine biology team. Mostly just a disappointing back and forth of neither of us answering each other's questions satisfyingly. They knew I took pictures. They didn't guess, but everyone has a phone nowadays, so it was inevitable. They said they can't legally tell me not to share them, but they did ask politely. Citing the lack of knowledge would just cause misinformation. They weren't good pictures anyway. Tom actually drove me home in my own vehicle. I was too sick to drive. I was too sick to talk too. It was a long, quiet and awkward drive. When I got home, I threw my clothes in the bin and cried in the shower. For the next few days, I stalked every news site New Zealand has, even the tabloids. A couple days later, some article popped up of a giant squid that had shown up in New Zealand waters. Apparently it's a hot spot for them to wash up on. There was a picture of a guy lying next to it for the size comparison, and I realized it actually was a lot smaller than I expected. Still big, but just nothing compared to the sea creature I saw. I've never been afraid of the ocean before. Even now, I know that whatever demons lurk down there have already lost the battle to mankind. I don't know whether to feel bad, grateful, or very real fear for whatever else is down there to come.
Hello listeners, if you enjoyed this story, please check out the author in the description. For more content, leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more sinister readings.